The story of Hansel and Gretel is a classic, a cautionary tale of two siblings lost in a dark forest, lured by a house made of sweets, and ultimately defeating a wicked witch. In the traditional telling, Hansel and Gretel outwit the witch, escape her clutches, and find their way back home to safety. The story ends with a sense of relief, a reminder of the resilience and resourcefulness of the innocent. But what if the tale didn't end with their escape? What if the darkness that surrounded them was not so easily vanquished? In this reimagined version, Hansel and Gretel's victory is short-lived, for the true evil they face is far older and more insidious than a mere witch. The forest itself is alive, a place of ancient malevolence, where the shadows have a will of their own. In this twisted version, the siblings' desperate struggle for survival leads them deeper into a nightmare from which there is no escape. The forest loomed before them like a monstrous beast, its gnarled branches reaching out to snatch anything foolish enough to enter. Hansel and Gretel, two children abandoned by their desperate parents, stood at the edge, clutching each other's hands. The path behind them had vanished, swallowed by the darkness. There was no turning back now. "Don't be scared, Gretel," Hansel whispered, though his voice trembled with fear. He clutched a small white stone, one of many he had dropped along the way to mark their path. But as he looked back, not a single stone gleamed in the moonlight. They were utterly lost. Gretel nodded, though she too was terrified. The forest was a place of ancient evils, a place where shadows whispered secrets, and the trees seemed alive with malevolent intent. The air grew colder as they ventured deeper, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of decaying leaves. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a sight that made their hearts leap with both hunger and dread. A house, its walls made of gingerbread, its roof adorned with sugar, and its windows framed in candy. It stood out like a beacon in the suffocating darkness, inviting them closer. Gretel's stomach growled, and Hansel's eyes widened with hunger. They approached cautiously, their fingers brushing the sweet walls. The taste of sugar on their lips was a momentary relief from their fear. But as they feasted, the door creaked open, revealing a hunched figure. The witch, with eyes as black as coal and skin like crumpled parchment, emerged from the shadows. Her smile was twisted, her teeth yellowed and sharp. "Come in, dearies," she crooned, her voice sickly sweet. "You must be starving." Hansel and Gretel hesitated, but their hunger overpowered their caution. They followed the witch into the dimly lit house, where the smell of roasting meat filled the air. The walls seemed to close in around them as they entered, the windows vanishing, the door sealing shut behind them. Inside, the house was a labyrinth of rooms, each more twisted and grotesque than the last. The walls dripped with something dark and sticky, and the air was thick with the stench of decay. The witch led them to a table where a feast was laid out. Roasted meats, steaming pies, and goblets of thick red liquid. "Eat, my sweet children," the witch said, her voice slithering into their ears like a serpent. "Eat to your heart's content." Hansel and Gretel ate ravenously, their hunger blinding them to the darkness gathering around them. But as they ate, the meat tasted strange, and the pies left an acrid aftertaste in their mouths. The liquid in the goblets was thick, metallic. Gretel stopped first, her stomach churning with unease. She looked at Hansel, who was still devouring the food with a strange desperation. His eyes had taken on a glazed, faraway look, and his hands moved mechanically, shoveling food into his mouth. "Hansel," she whispered, but he didn't respond. The witch watched them, her smile growing wider, her teeth glinting in the dim light. "Do you know why the stones didn't lead you back, my dear?" she asked, her voice mocking. Gretel's heart skipped a beat. How did she know? "Because this is where your path was meant to end," the witch continued. "This is the place where the lost come to be found and consumed." Gretel's eyes widened in horror as she realized the truth. The food, the house, it was all a trap, a lure for the hungry and desperate. And now they were ensnared. Suddenly, the room began to shift and change. The walls pulsed with a sickening life, the floor writhing beneath them. The feast on the table rotted away, revealing the grotesque remains of those who had come before them. Bones, gnawed and splintered, lay among the spoiled food. Hansel's face twisted in agony as the witch's curse took hold. His body contorted, his limbs elongating and warping. His skin turned pale, almost translucent, his eyes hollow and lifeless. He had become one of them, a shadow, a ghost trapped within the witch's lair. Gretel screamed, backing away from the monstrous figure that had once been her brother. The witch cackled, her laughter echoing through the shifting walls. "Run, little girl," the witch taunted. "Run, and perhaps you might escape, if you're lucky." Gretel bolted, her feet pounding against the undulating floor. The house twisted and turned, leading her deeper into its nightmarish depths. The walls whispered her name, beckoning her to join them in eternal darkness. But Gretel was determined to escape. She pushed forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The witch's laughter followed her, growing louder, closer. She burst into a room that was different from the others, cold, sterile, and bathed in an unnatural light. In the center of the room was a large iron oven, its door ajar, flames licking at the edges. Desperation gave Gretel strength. She turned to face the witch, who was now a towering figure of shadow and malice. The witch lunged at her, but Gretel was ready. With a scream, she shoved the witch into the oven, slamming the door shut. The witch's screams filled the room, but Gretel didn't flinch. She watched as the flames consumed the dark figure, burning away the shadows that had ensnared them. But as the witch burned, the house began to collapse. The walls crumbled, the floor buckled, and the air filled with the acrid scent of burning flesh. Gretel scrambled for the exit, her heart pounding in her chest. She burst out into the forest, the cold night air hitting her like a slap. The house behind her imploded, swallowed by the earth, leaving nothing but a smoldering crater. Gretel fell to her knees, sobbing with relief. She was free, free from the witch, free from the nightmare. But as she looked around, she realized something was terribly wrong. The forest was silent, unnaturally so. No birds sang, no wind rustled the leaves. The trees stood tall and motionless, their branches twisted like claws. The path before her was no longer the familiar one she had entered. It was darker, more twisted, leading into the heart of an even deeper darkness. And then she heard it, a voice, faint and ghostly, calling her name. "Hansel?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The voice called again, closer this time, filled with sorrow and pain. Gretel turned, her heart racing, and saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was Hansel, or what remained of him. His body was a twisted, ghostly form. his eyes hollow and filled with despair. "Gretel," he whispered, reaching out to her with a skeletal hand. "You didn't save me. You only set her free." Gretel's blood ran cold as the truth dawned on her. The witch had been more than just a witch. She was something ancient, something that fed on despair and fear. And now Gretel had unleashed her upon the world. The forest began to close in around her, the shadows growing darker, more malevolent. The witch's laughter echoed in the distance, a promise of the horrors yet to come. Gretel tried to run, but the forest wouldn't let her go. The trees reached out, their branches wrapping around her, pulling her into the darkness. Hansel's ghostly figure faded, his eyes filled with sorrow. "Forgive me, Gretel," he whispered as the shadows consumed her. The forest swallowed her whole, the last echoes of her screams lost in the night. The witch was free, and the nightmare was only beginning. And so, the story of Hansel and Gretel did not end in triumph, but in eternal darkness, with the shadows feasting on the souls of the lost. The witch had returned more powerful than ever, and the forest was her domain once more. Thank you for joining us in the world of Twilight Fables. If you enjoyed this tale and want to hear more stories like this, please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more.